Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Beyond the Sewing Room. I'm Diane. So today I'm going to be sharing with you my latest scrapbusting project. So I've been continuing with this theme this week, and this week I've made a man's shirt. So more on that in a moment. Now it's not so hard to make, so if you've not made one before, don't worry, as long as you take your time. These are easy to do, great to do for some selfless sewing. And also I'm going to be sharing with you some books. So some books that I've read, I'm currently reading, and what's on my to be read pile. So stick around for that. Now first up, my scrapbusting project. Now I've had this piece of material for a little while now because it was given to me in a bundle of fabrics that were donated to me when somebody had a clear out, and I didn't know quite what to do with it. Now when I saw it, I thought it would be great for my husband. So this is one of the small pieces that's left, so I've done really well in just ending up with crumbs with this one, which is what I love because it means that you've really got the most out of the fabric. Now it's a blend, I'm not entirely sure of what because I don't have the label or anything for it, but I do believe it was only about 1 metre. Now it may have been a little under 1 metre, and it had a small piece cut out of it as well. So I knew that I wasn't going to be able to get the shirt out of it in its entirety, as it were. So the shirt that I've gone for, now I have made this for my husband before, so I'll show you that one in a moment as well. It's this one, it's McCall's 6044. So this is the shirt, and I went for this one because I know that he really loves it, the one that I made. It's in regular rotation and it's a really good fit. Now, what you can do with this one is if you're trying to scrap bust and use up all your scraps, you can go for the short sleeve version, of course, but then there are also other things that also take up a lot of fabric. And I have mentioned that in a previous video. Now, when I made my brown Art Gallery Fabrics shirt, I did use a different fabric for the undercollar, the band, and the back of the button band down the front. And that is something that I've had to do on this particular shirt as well because there was nowhere near enough fabric. He also doesn't like a short sleeve. So that was a bit of a problem because I couldn't just make it short sleeves. These sleeves in this particular shirt are in 2 pieces. Now I'm going to show you the shirt in a moment. I'll also insert some images of my husband wearing it. He didn't want his face on, so I've taken that out. But the shirt, I've done the sleeves in 3 pieces rather than 2, so I'll show you that now straight away. So here is the shirt, and he will wear a 3/4 sleeve, or if you think about a shirt sleeve rolled up to the elbow, he likes that look. So he likes long sleeves and he likes somewhere in between, but not the short version. So I'm sure there's lots of people like that because there are women who also don't like to show their upper arm. So they like a 3/4 or a long sleeve. So for various reasons, people don't want to show their arms. So here I've done a 3/4. So this comes to just below the elbow. And I've also made a little tab with a button, as you can see, just to give it some detail. I have done that before on another shirt years ago, and the reason I did that is because it had a rip in the elbow. And I did both sleeves, cut them to the same size, added an extra panel on with the bit that I'd cut off and made tabs and did that then. So that's a great way to save a shirt also if you find a rip somewhere on the lower sleeve like that. So I've turned it up. I've also added a little bit of binding here on the back of this seam where it's turned up, just to hide the overlocking, to make it a little bit neater. And I'll show you now, the back of the sleeve is in, on the shirt pattern, the sleeve is in 2 pieces. So you've got the upper sleeve and then you've got the under sleeve panel. That is the case in many shirt patterns. But in this one, because I didn't have enough fabric, we've now got an extra panel at the bottom. Can you see that on the back? And what I've done is I've added it on and then I've just top stitched it twice. Oh no, once. I top stitched it once. I've top stitched it twice down that panel and once on this panel here. And the reason I've done that is because when I was cutting out, because like I said, I was very short on fabric, the undersleeve, I only had enough to do one side and not both. So what I've had to do is make both the same and have an added on panel on the bottom of both. Now when it's on, you can't even see that. As you can see, it's the under sleeve anyway. And my husband did say that when he tried it on, he wouldn't have even noticed that. So that's what I've done there. And then I tried to match the checks as much as possible. So I've managed to do it at the sides and you can see here at the top, but you don't have to do it there for it to be obvious. Now at the front on this panel, I had to cut these button band panels out where I could. So although the checks, the lines of them match when it's buttoned up, I think you can see it's probably the wrong shade of check there because you've got the pink one there. But again, that doesn't matter. As long as things are in line, that is fine. And I've managed to do it in line with the lines with the pocket. But again, I was cutting this pocket out on literal crumbs of fabric. So I did what I could. So the pocket's there. So it's in the right lines. But as you can see, if you're going to be a purist about this, then that one there is probably in the wrong colour shade at that point. It matches on this line. It matches on this line. I think that's about as near as you can get it when you're working with such small amounts of fabric. Now the under collar is in a grey, like this, and so is the inner collar stand, and I've done that to match the inner band fabric, which is also in grey. And because we did that, I got out all the odd buttons and different buttons that I got left over in different packets, and I found that I got enough in a cream from lots of different packets that had been opened, enough in a white, or enough in this dark grey colour. So my husband chose this dark grey to go with the grey that's sort of showing when your shirt's open just here. So he chose those, and the reason I've got those left is, as you may know, I make samples as part of my job, and often I'll be making something and there'll be a few left in a packet of buttons from a garment that I've made and that's been sent back for a sample. And then obviously I end up with lots with just a couple in. But then if you add them all together, that means that when I'm starting a new project, I often have enough buttons. And sometimes, as you've seen in the past, I may have done alternating buttons in different colours because I like that look as well. But maybe not on my husband's shirt. He probably wouldn't like that. So that's the shirt. I'm loving it. He likes it. It's a great fit. And it's another piece of fabric that it's been used up out of my stash, and it was not really big enough for a shirt, but we've managed it. And that's now a wearable item that's going to be in circulation, and I think it's nice summer colours as well. So I'm really happy with that. I'll show you the one that I've made previously and that he wears all the time. So now I'll show you the one that I made previously. Now this was not a stash busting project. This one had new fabric. It was specifically for this, and I made the long sleeve version. So this one in this lovely pink and white check, and this is a cotton, this one. This is worn every week. So once a week, every week this one gets worn, and he does love it. And it washes really nicely, and he really likes the colours. So I knew that when I was going to try and make him another shirt, I would use this pattern. I'm just going to talk a little bit about what you could do and what you need to think about if you're trying to use small amounts of fabric on this pattern. So things to think about, of course, if you want to do some stash busting is you could do pockets and cuffs in a different colour if you're trying to save fabric. Again, like I've done with the undercollar, stand and button band, you can do it in two pieces and have the inside one in a contrasting colour. If you're open to wearing short sleeves, you can make the short sleeve version. Of course, you can also make the length a little bit shorter because it is quite a long shirt, I feel, to tuck in or wear out. So if you want to take a little off there, that will save you some of the fabric. You also need to consider the size, because if you're making a much larger size, it will be more difficult to get it out of a really small amount of fabric. Now, for that particular one that I made, even for the view A with the short sleeves, it does say 2 meters or 1.5, depending on whether you're using 60 or 44, is that right? Yeah, 45 inch wide or 60 inch wide fabric. So depending on what fabric you buy, they're always different widths, so you need to consider that. And different things that you could do some details on the pockets. You could leave the pockets off altogether. And if you're open for it, if you want to make it in completely different fabrics, you could do the sleeves a different colour. Especially if you're using short sleeves, I think that can look really nice for the summer. So now I'm going to talk a little about the recent reads, books that I've read recently that I've enjoyed, and also a couple that I'm reading at the moment and a few that are to be read. Now, recently I've just read The Book of Fire by Christopher Terry, I think that's how you say it. I love her books, the ones that I've read so far. So I've read 2 so far, and I want to read The Beekeeper of Aleppo. I've not read that one yet. Now, I read Songbirds, and I do find that she deals with quite complex issues, and she does it in a really lovely way and a really engaging way that really makes you think. So sometimes when you're reading fiction, it's good to read books that, you know, sort of engage you in things that are actually going on in the world. While fantasy, I like fantasy as well, escapism is great. It's good if things really get you thinking. So this particular book, it deals with the issue of a wildfire, and I'm not going to give too much away at the beginning, because if I do that, it might spoil it for you when you're reading it. But of course it deals with issues of global warming and blame involved in this particular story and in global warming as a whole, really, and also the family, the community, how it's impacted, and this particular family, how it impacts them, what happens. I really enjoyed it. It's such a good book. Now the next one is Brain Fog. Now this particular one jumped out at me. I have been trying to pick up and go for books from different sections. I always try and get a fiction and a non-fiction when I'm picking them up from the library. I enjoyed the book, but a lot of it is, there is a lot of common sense in there. Things that I'm already doing and things that probably you're already doing, but sometimes it's good to have a reminder. So there was something that I didn't like about the book, and that was the endless surveys that you had to fill in if you were going to fill them all in their entirety, and also the schedules at the end and the rituals at the end. I felt they went a little bit overboard, and the thought of anybody sort of ticking off this list and going through every one of these sort of rituals in the morning, during the day and at night, on top of everything else that people have to do, I felt that was a little bit far-fetched, in that maybe some people have followed it and maybe some people have gone down that road of filling in every table that was in this book, but I just felt that was too much. So obviously none of it is a quick fix, but there are some good tips in there. A lot of tips on diet, sleep, exercise, keeping your brain fit and things like that. Like I said, very obvious, but also sometimes we do need a reminder. Now, a few things that jumped out at me that I'm going to try harder to take a look at are things like splitting my focus. Now, I sort of know I do this, but it's sometimes, like I say, it's good to get a reminder. So when you're very busy and you have lots of things on your mind, it's not that you're forgetting things as such, it's just that you've not fully focused on them in the first place. And I think it's the same with anybody. We try and focus on all these things at once and try and keep them all in our head and then wonder why we're forgetting things. So a lot of the time it's not a fault with our brain, it's just organisation and keeping those things where they need to be. So something I found that I need to do is just focus on what I'm doing at the time, and also if I write things down, it's not a failure to write things down, it's just a way of keeping track of where you're at. So focus on this one thing at the moment before moving on to the next, instead of trying to keep them all at the forefront of your mind. And another one was to rest when needed rather than just battling on, because I think sometimes we can find if you've had a bad night's sleep or something like that, and then you get tired through the day but you're really busy, I just tend to push on and think, well, I'll stop at the end of it. That's sometimes difficult if you're at work, but if you have lunch breaks, you need to make the most of those. When I used to work in school, I often used to just work straight through my lunch break, and often you wouldn't get a break either at all during the day because you were with the children or out on duty or whatever. So often you will find, I think a lot of people are the same, you might think, well, I'll get it all done now rather than stopping while I'm in a flow of it. But that means that you can't work for those lengths of time. You can't work for 8 hours non-stop and give it your full attention. You do need to be stopping at some point and having a proper break. So to make sure that you do that. So those are just a couple of the takeaways that I got from that book. Now, just recently I finished The Glass House by Eve Chase. Now, I picked this one up in the charity shop for 75p. I've really enjoyed it. It was a really good story, an engaging story, and more of a light read, this one. So there were a few things that I didn't like. I mean, there was some of the use of description in it that just made me, I just didn't like that. But anybody, as I've said before, who's wrote a book, great. I mean, the sort of forest setting and the family, the whole drama around the family. So Rita is a nanny who works for this family a very well-off family. They've gone to live in this house in the forest to try and resolve some issues with the mother of the family that she is caring for, and there's all sorts of things going on. But then it goes back and forth between present day and the past, which a lot of this kind of story does that, sort of general family fiction, I would put it as, and a very light read. I did enjoy it. It's not heavy going, it's not high literature, but a really nice one to put on your list. And she does have some other books, so I think I may check out one or two of those at some point. Not right now, but maybe in the future. A good one for sort of taking on holiday. So maybe if you want something light and frothy, that's one to go for. So that's my recent one that I finished. Then what I'm currently reading, so these two I got from the library. And again, I went for a different section. I went for the sort of people, places section and got this one by Richard Holloway. And then I was amazed when I had a little look how many books he's actually wrote. So The Stories We Tell Ourselves. Now, I'm enjoying this one already. Really thought-provoking about the stories and the things that we encounter throughout our lives and the way they impact us and the way they affect us, and also colour everything that we think about the world. So there's some really interesting quotes just in the preface alone. So as I said, I've only just started it, but I'm really thinking this is going to be a great one and one to put on your list. Really, I'm finding him really wise already. So Richard Holloway, Stories We Tell Ourselves, that's one that I've just started. I haven't started this one yet, but this is to be read. Rewild Yourself, 23 Spellbinding Ways to Make Nature More Visible. So I really like the idea of this, and I hope it's going to open my eyes to things to look out for in the garden and when I'm out for a walk in the countryside, because I do a lot of that. And then I've picked up from the charity shop another 75p find, and that's The Skeleton Key. So if you've read this, let me know. So it is quite a long one. Let's have a look. 497 pages. I will know within 100 or so if it's worth keeping going. I tend to find if after 100 I'm really not enjoying it, I tend to put them down now because life's too short. But if you've read it and it's a good one, let me know. If I don't enjoy it, it will go back to the charity shop anyway. But that's one to be read. Well, I hope you've enjoyed that today. I'm going to be working on a jacket. That's my next project with some gifted fabric, and I'm going to be using Nini G, which is behind me on the board, 8845. So that's what I'm going to be working on next. I plan to cut that out today. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think, and bye for now.